You were about to see the moment Gordon Hayward's ankle turned 90 degrees in the wrong direction during his very first game as a Boston Celtic.
I don't know that I've seen an injury quite like that or a reaction like that in person.
And in this video, you'll see 15 of the NBA's scariest moments. We're looking at the incidents that made arenas fall silent and had players praying on the court. Some of these clips are hard to watch, but they're important reminders of what these athletes are going out risking every single time. Imagine being at the peak of your career and your body just says, nah fam, I'm good. That's exactly what happened to these NBA stars. We're talking about elite athletes who push themselves to absolute extremes, night after night. Their bodies are constantly on the edge of what's humanly possible. When you're playing 82 regular season games, plus the playoffs, running miles up and down the court while taking hits that would just send normal people to the ER, sometimes your body just breaks down in ways nobody sees coming. But nothing prepared the NBA world for what happened on April 29th, 1993. The Boston Celtics were facing the Charlotte Hornets in Game 1 of the first round of the playoffs. Reggie Lewis, the Celtics' 27-year-old star, who was averaging over 20 points per game that season, suddenly collapsed on the court. No contact, no warning. Just a young superstar crumpling to the hardwood as thousands of fans watched in horror. Lewis eventually got back up and even tried to continue playing, but after scoring 10 points in the first half, he collapsed again and had to leave the game for good. The medical staff initially thought it was just heat exhaustion or dehydration. Nobody imagined the terrifying truth that would come soon to light. It took a team of 12 cardiologists at New England Baptist Hospital that examined Lewis and delivered devastating news. He had a career-ending heart condition called ventricular arrhythmia. The doctors were clear. If Lewis continued playing basketball, he could die on the court. They told him his career was over, just like that. One day, you're leading your team in the playoffs. The next day, the doctors are telling you you'll never play the game again. But Lewis wasn't ready to accept that reality. In a move that would ultimately prove fatal, he sought second opinions until he found what he wanted to hear. He visited Dr. Gilbert Mudge at Brigham and Women's Hospital, who diagnosed him with much less serious condition, neurocardiogenic syncope. This doctor cleared Lewis to play again, telling him his fainting was just due to a nerve condition that caused an abnormal blood flow pattern. With this new diagnosis in hand, Lewis began preparing for a comeback. Despite everything pointing to failure, Lewis was determined to return to the court. The love of the game was just too powerful. Then came July 27th, 1993, a day that would forever haunt the league. Lewis was shooting hoops at Brandeis University during an off-season practice. It was supposed to be a light workout, just some casual pickup basketball as part of his comeback preparation. But midway through this session, Lewis collapsed again. This time, he never got up. Emergency personnel rushed to the scene and tried desperately to revive him, but it was just too late. Reggie Lewis was pronounced dead at just 27 years old. An autopsy later confirmed what those first doctors warned. Lewis had a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a serious heart condition that causes the heart muscle to become abnormally thick, making it harder to pump blood. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the NBA. The Celtics, still recovering from the loss of their championship era, now faced the death of their brand new franchise player. Fans who had watched Lewis grow from a first-round pick into an all-star were left wondering if his death could have been prevented had he had listened to those first doctors. But the scary reality is that heart conditions continue to threaten NBA players' careers even today. Hank Gathers, another promising superstar, had collapsed and died on the court just a few years before Lewis. A couple years later, Bosh would later see his career cut short due to blood clots. Even Jeff Green needed heart surgery to continue his career, but nothing sent chills down the spines of basketball fans quite like what happened on July 24th, 2023. LeBron James' son, Bronny James, a top prospect headed to USC, suddenly collapsed during basketball practice.
Doctors found that the 18-year-old suffered a sudden cardiac arrest because of a congenital heart defect.
The 18-year-old suffered cardiac arrest on the court, with emergency responders rushing to save his life. For a moment, it seemed like the basketball world was witnessing a horrifying repeated history. Unlike Lewis, Bronny survived, thank God, thanks to the action of the USC medical staff. He was later diagnosed with a congenital heart defect that required surgery. The incident stunned the basketball community, especially those old enough to remember what happened to Reggie Lewis. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Another young player with a bright future ahead, another sudden collapse, another heart condition that nobody saw coming. Blood clots and exploding engines might be the last thing you have on your mind when thinking about NBA danger, but these real threats have left players staring death right in the face miles away from any basketball court. court. While medical emergencies during games get all of the attention, some of the scariest moments for NBA players happen when nobody's even watching the game, like 30,000 feet in the air. NBA teams practically live on planes during the season, cramming themselves in the charter jets for countless cross-country flights. It's so routine that players barely think twice about it, scrolling through their phones, napping, or playing cards while soaring through the sky. But for the Utah Jazz in 2019, what started out as just another team flight quickly turned into a life-flashing before-your-eyes event nightmare that none of them will ever forget. Shortly after takeoff, the players felt a violent jolt rip through the cabin as one of the plane's engines literally exploded mid-flight. What followed was pure terror as the aircraft began shaking uncontrollably.
Plane shook. I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's loud. Well, you look outside, the engine is on fire, bro.
Convincing everyone on board they were about to die. The situation was so bad that players started sending what they believed would be their final messages to their family members. One player frantically texted his family saying, "I love y'all, like we're playing with the engines on fire."
So I text my mom, my sister, "Hey, this is it. Like I love y'all. Like the plane, the engine's on fire, whatever." And if you ever see my mom ask her, they thought I was joking.
Imagine that. Professional athletes who perform under intense pressure every night, completely breaking down as they face something far scarier than a Game 7. Players who normally project invincibility were reduced to sending goodbye text while their airplane violently shuddered thousands of feet above the ground. The pilots, somehow maintaining their composure through the chaos, managed to perform an emergency landing that saved everybody on board. But the psychological damage was done. Many of the players were visibly shaken for days afterwards, with some developing serious fears of flying that still go on to this day. While the Jazz players escape with their lives, other NBA stars haven't been so fortunate when facing medical emergencies away from the hardwood. Chris Bosh, an 11-time All-Star and 2-time NBA champion with the Miami Heat, found himself battling something far more terrifying than any playoff opponent. It started in 2015 after a seemingly normal game against the Dallas Mavs. Bosh began experiencing chest pain that quickly evolved into something way worse. What he didn't know was that blood clots had formed in his leg and traveled all the way up to his lungs, a potentially fatal condition called a pulmonary embolism. Bosh later described the terrifying experience in his own words.
It got so bad, like my whole left side of my body, I couldn't move it without pain. I went to the doctor's office, they took an x-ray of my chest. He said, yeah, so that's a blood clot. My lung was collapsed, it was bad.
The condition nearly killed him before doctors could identify and treat it. For a professional athlete at the peak of his powers, the medical emergency came completely out of nowhere. Bosh recovered and tried to return to playing basketball, putting in the grueling work to get his body back to the NBA standard. But just when it seemed like his career was back on track, another disaster happened. In February of 2016, doctors discovered another blood clot, this time in Bosh's calf. This wasn't just a setback, it was the beginning of the end. What makes blood clots particularly dangerous for professional athletes is that the physical exertion of playing basketball significantly increases the risk of clots dislodging and traveling to vital organs, like the lungs, heart, or brain. There's a little health lesson for you all. Each time Bosh stepped onto a court, he was literally risking his life. After multiple comeback attempts and consultations with specialists, the truth became clear. Doctors determined that continuing to play basketball posed a fatal risk for Bosh. The very thing he has dedicated his life to was now the thing that could kill him. After a long and difficult battle to save his career, Bosh was ultimately forced to retire in February of 2019, ending what would have certainly been a Hall of Fame career. Basketball isn't the only game with life or death stakes for NBA players. When the final buzzer sounds and the arena lights dim, some athletes have stepped into situations far more dangerous than any playoff series. While Chris Bosh fought an invisible enemy within his own body, other NBA stars found themselves staring down threats they never saw coming, and some they accidentally created themselves. The most chilling example happened on Valentine's Day in 2022, when former NBA first-round pick Jason Williams transformed from millionaire athlete to accidental killer in a single careless moment. During a tour of his New Jersey mansion, Williams decided to show off his collection of shotguns to friends at a party. What started as a reckless display of wealth ended in tragedy when Williams accidentally fired a 12-gauge shotgun, killing his limo driver and his friend, 55-year-old Kostas Christofi. He later said in an interview he takes responsibility, he was showing people guns, and he didn't even know that Catastrophic was in the house. But what makes this story even more disturbing is what happened after that. Instead of immediately calling for help, Williams' panic led him to do a terrible choice. He tried to stage the crime scene to make it appear as if Catastrophic had shot himself. I panicked. I did a cowardly act of not staying there after an accident and just taking it. He placed the gun in Christophic's hands, trying to make it seem like he did it rather than facing the consequences of his actions. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. It was the beginning of an 8-year legal nightmare that would eventually land the former NBA player behind bars. The courts didn't look kindly on Williams' attempt to cover it all up. After years of legal battles, plea deals, and retrials, Williams ultimately received a 5-year prison sentence. His NBA career was already over due to injury, but now his freedom was gone too, all because of a split-second decision to show off his weapons to party guests. But Williams isn't the only NBA player who's had a brush with death away from the hardwood. Boston Celtics legend Paul Pierce found himself fighting for his life after a night out turned into a nightmare on September 25th, 2000. What started as a typical evening at a Boston nightclub called the Buzz Club escalated into violence when Pierce was surrounded by a group of men in the VIP section. Without warning, Pierce was stabbed 11 times in the face, neck, and back, then hit over the head with a bottle just for good measure.
So I look up, I got a jacket on. I look up, and my jacket is red, blood everywhere. I'm kind of leaking down my face. I can really keep my eyes open.
The attack was so bad that one of the knife wounds penetrated his sternum, narrowly missing his heart. Pierce's teammate Tony Batty and Batty's brother rushed him to the hospital while he was bleeding out, a decision that likely saved his life. The attack was so bad that it didn't even sink in for Pierce fully until after he was released from the hospital. He said in an interview after that, "I get home after 2 days in the hospital and I'm seeing the news and they show a kid got stabbed twice and died. I'm lucky, man. He's lucky." Somehow, despite being stabbed nearly a dozen times, Pierce not only survived, but miraculously didn't miss a single game that season. But while his body healed, his mind remained scarred. He said in an interview, "I actually carried a gun for 2 years right after that. I was so paranoid." The stabbing changed his entire world around him. Once confident moving through public spaces, Pierce now saw threats everywhere he went. The incident forced him to completely rethink his lifestyle, avoiding certain situations and environments that he would never have questioned before. His experience isn't unique in the NBA community. Other players like Chris Copeland have also faced life-threatening violence in nightclubs, suffering significant injuries that impacted their careers. The dangers lurking on basketball courts go far beyond nightclub violence. Forget about getting stabbed. The most traumatic career enders happen right in front of our eyes during nationally televised games. These catastrophic injuries don't just change careers, they change lives in ways that make the even most hard NBA veterans turn away in horror. Every jump, every landing, every explosive cut is literally the potential for disaster. Every NBA athlete is in a constant state of risk. Their multi-million-dollar contracts and future earnings depend all on the ligaments thinner than shoelaces and bones that can snap right under the wrong pressure. And when disaster strikes, it happens in high definition for the whole world to witness. Gordon Hayward learned this brutal fact just 5 minutes and 15 seconds into his Boston Celtics career. After signing a massive $128 million contract in 2017, Gordon went up for an alley-oop in the season opener against Cleveland. What happened next made the entire arena go quiet. His ankle rotated nearly 90 degrees in the wrong direction. A grotesque injury, if you might say. That was so visually disturbing that players on both of the benches covered their faces. Everybody looked away. The sickening angle of his foot, pointing almost completely the opposite way while he just laid out on the court, became an image that haunted NBA fans for years. His teammates who had been celebrating minutes earlier now knelt in prayer. Some turned away, unable to process what they just saw. But Hayward's injury, as bad as it was, somehow pales in comparison to what happened to Paul George during what should have been a routine Team USA scrimmage in 2014. As George raced back on defense to block a fast break layup, he landed awkwardly against a basketball stanchion. The impact created one of the most stomach-turning moments in basketball history. His right leg snapped in half, creating a compound fracture so bad that players immediately turned away in disgust. The silence after that, deafening. His teammates who saw the injury were just shaken. Others puked on the sidelines, from the graphic horror of what they just saw. The injury was so bad, it sparked immediate discussions about safety regulations and led to changes about how stanchions are positioned in basketball. One innocent basketball play had transformed from athletic competition to medical emergency in the blink of an eye. Perhaps most disturbing of all was Sean Livingston's knee injury in 2007, which doctors initially feared might require amputation. What began as a routine fast break ended with one of the most catastrophic knee injuries the sport's ever seen. Livingston's knee literally dislocated, with his leg bending in directions human limbs aren't even designed to move. The injury was so bad, it tore multiple ligaments while dislocating his patella. It got to a point that the doctors seriously considered amputating his leg. The mental toll of these injuries goes far beyond the physical pain. Athletes who suffer such catastrophic injuries often go against depression, anxiety, even PTSD.
You know, is my knee, is my leg gonna be okay? And of course, they was talking about the whole, you know, amputation and all that. They threw that around early because of the, you know, blood flow and all that. Once that was good, okay, I'm out the woods.
Their identity is an elite athlete, and now it's in question. Are they gonna ever be the same? Sometimes the mind can heal slower than the body, with players getting flashbacks, nightmares, and fears of returning and doing the same moves they did to get injured. Yet, amid these horror stories stands one moment that perfectly captures both the brutality of basketball injuries and the superhuman mental toughness of the greatest basketball player ever. On April 12, 2013, Kobe had a complete tear of his Achilles during a game against the Golden State Warriors. In what has since become an iconic display of Mamba mentality, Kobe not only remained in the court after the injury, but shockingly sank 2 crucial free throws right before limping off by himself without help. Think about that. A complete rupture of the tendon that's essential for walking, jumping, and running. An injury that would leave most people screaming in pain and immediately seeking emergency medical attention. And Kobe's response was to stay in the game long enough to make 2 free throws. That moment has perhaps become the most perfect representation of Kobe's mind, competition, and pain tolerance, symbolizing everything that made Kobe the icon he is today. Behind the highlight reels, million-dollar contracts, and the superhero-like athleticism, NBA stars are just as human as you and me. These 15 scariest moments we've covered show just how quickly it can change a basketball player's life. Paul Pierce's stabbing incident wasn't just a physical scar, but a mental one that changed his entire outlook. He can't let his family down by putting himself in these positions. The perspective shift that happens to every player faces a death or career-ending injury. Next time you see players gathering in a circle, heads bowed down around a fallen teammate, remember, what's at stake? For them, it's not just about losing game checks or championship rings. It's about potentially losing everything. Some, like Paul Pierce, came back strong. Others never got the chance to tuck a basketball professionally ever again. But all of them carry the weight of knowing that each time they step onto the court, they're risking more than just a game. They're risking their future for our entertainment. And that's the scariest reality of it all.